The knife trembled in Chika Okafor's hand. 25 doctors stood frozen in a semicircle around the dying man, their expensive suits rumpled, their faces grey with exhaustion and failure. Behind them, 4 bodyguards held guns trained on her head. Steady hands, steady aim, fingers resting on triggers. The red laser dots danced across her dark skin like drops of blood that hadn't fallen yet. Put down the blade. The command came from Dae-jung, the right-hand man whose cold eyes had watched her with suspicion since her first day in this mansion. Step away from him. Now. But Chika couldn't step away. Not from the man sprawled on the marble floor before her, his black veins spreading like poisoned rivers beneath skin that had gone the colour of ash. Not from Junho Kang, the reclusive millionaire, the feared Mafia boss, the man whose name people whispered like a curse. The man who was dying. The metallic smell of blood hung thick in the air, mixing with the acrid scent of fear sweat from doctors who had tried everything and failed. An antique clock ticked somewhere in the vast study, each second a countdown to death. The marble floor felt ice-cold beneath Chika's knees, but her palms were slick with perspiration. 6 months ago I didn't know this man existed, she thought, her internal voice somehow calm, despite the terror clawing at her throat. Now I'm about to cut him open, or die trying. Her mind flashed to Lagos, to Emeka, her 12-year-old brother, lying in a hospital bed, his small body racked with sickle cell pain, to her mother's worn hands counting naira notes that would never be enough, to the medical bills that had driven Chika across continents to this cold, beautiful prison of a mansion in Seoul. I'm sorry, Mama. If this goes wrong, I won't be coming home. The clot beneath Junho's wrist pulsed, black, unnatural, almost alive. She'd seen something like it once during her clinical rotations in nursing school, before she'd been forced to drop out. The textbook image flashed in her memory, subcutaneous clotting with necrotic pattern, requiring immediate manual extraction. Her nursing instructor's voice echoed across the years. Sometimes the textbook answer will get your patient killed. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and do what seems impossible. Chika's hand steadied. If I don't do this, he dies, she said quietly, her Nigerian accent thick with determination. You can shoot me after, but let me try first. She didn't wait for permission. The sterilized blade caught the light from the crystal chandelier as she positioned it against the blackened vein. Junho's eyes flickered open for just a moment. Dark, pain-filled, but somehow focusing on her face. In that brief glance, she saw something that stole her breath. Recognition, permission, trust. She pressed the blade to his skin and made the cut. Blood welled up, too dark, too thick, and she worked quickly, her dropped-out nursing school training taking over. The doctors gasped, the bodyguards tensed, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. She flushed the wound with saline, then did the unthinkable. She used the IV tube to transfuse her own blood directly into the extraction site. The room held its breath. The black toxin began to dissipate, responding to something in her blood that none of the expensive doctors had possessed. Colour slowly returned to Junho's face. His chest rose with a deeper breath. And in that moment, Chika Okafor had no idea that saving his life would bind them together in ways she never imagined, or trap her in a world where love could be deadlier than poison. Before I tell you how I ended up here, hit that like button. And subscribe, because what I discovered about the poison, about him, and about the traitor in his own house, you won't believe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and buckle up. This story has more twists than Seoul's underground tunnels. 3 months earlier, Lagos, Nigeria. The heat in Lagos was suffocating, but it was the kind of heat that felt like home. Chika stood in the doorway of their small flat in Yaba, watching her mother count naira notes at the worn kitchen table. The bills were stacked in careful piles, rent, food, utilities, but the largest pile, the one that never seemed to shrink, was labelled simply, Emeka's treatment. Chi-Chi, you don't have to do this. Her mother's voice cracked, her worn hands trembling as she looked up. Those hands had worked as a seamstress for 30 years, the fingertips permanently calloused from needlework. There must be another way. But there wasn't another way. They both knew it. Emeka needs the new medication, Mama. The doctor said without it. She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Her 12-year-old brother had been battling sickle cell anemia his entire life. The pain crises were getting worse, more frequent. The local hospital did what it could, but the newer, more effective treatments were expensive. Impossibly expensive for a family that had lost everything when their father died 3 years ago. Seoul wasn't my dream destination, Chika murmured, pressing her forehead against the warm glass. It was my last option. The recruitment agency had approached her at the pharmacy where she worked. Live-in domestic position in Seoul, South Korea. Excellent pay, room and board included, legal work visa provided. The contract terms had been vague, something about a wealthy, reclusive employer who valued privacy and discretion. The agency representative had glossed over certain clauses, speaking quickly in English peppered with Korean words Chika didn't understand. She'd signed anyway. Desperation had a way of making red flags invisible. She was ready to do whatever it took to save her brother. She got to Seoul in late November. The mansion was in Gangnam, tucked into the hills where the city's elite built their fortresses. As the car wound up the private road, Chika's breath caught. The estate was enormous, modern architecture with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that somehow managed to reveal nothing. High walls surrounded the property, topped with security cameras that tracked their approach. What kind of house needs this much security? A woman waited at the entrance. She was in her late 50s, Korean, with severely pulled-back hair. I am Minseo, head of household staff. Her English was accented but precise. You will follow me. Do not speak unless spoken to. Chika's room was small but clean, located in the servants' wing on the ground floor. Minseo explained her duties in clipped sentences: cleaning, laundry, occasional meal preparation. The East Wing only, never the West Wing, never the third floor, never Mr. Kang's private study. There are rules, Minseo said, her dark eyes boring into Chika's. Rule 1. You never enter the West Wing. Rule 2. You never ask questions. Rule 3. You never look him in the eye. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Good. Most girls don't last 3 months here. The work is hard. Mr. Kang values privacy. He does not like mistakes. She paused at the door. Stay invisible, and you'll be fine. Invisible. Chika had spent most of her life feeling invisible. The scholarship student in nursing school, the dropout nobody remembered, the pharmacy assistant customers looked through. She could do invisible. But invisible became harder 3 days later when she saw him for the first time. She'd been dusting the hallway near the library when she heard his voice, low, controlled, speaking rapid Korean into a phone. The door was ajar, and through the gap, she caught a glimpse of him. Junho Kang stood with his back to her, silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Seoul. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders beneath an immaculately tailored black suit. He turned slightly, and Chika saw his profile: sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and a scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw, pale against his skin. Araseo, he said into the phone, his voice quiet but somehow more threatening for its lack of volume. Guram Gurokehera. I understand. Then do it. Chika stepped back quickly, heart pounding, but not before their eyes met for half a second. His gaze was dark, intense, calculating. She hurried away, Minseo's words echoing in her mind. Never look him in the eye. That evening, she met the other key members of the household. Dae-jung appeared without warning while she was folding laundry. He was younger than Junho, mid-30s, with a hard face and cold eyes. You're the new girl. It wasn't a question. He looked her up and down with open suspicion. From Nigeria. Yes, sir. How long do you plan to stay? As long as I'm needed, sir. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or contempt. We'll see. He walked away without another word, but Chika felt his suspicion like a physical weight. Dr. Han was different, nervous, fidgety, with glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. He arrived the following week for what Minseo called routine checkups, though Chika noticed he brought a large medical bag and stayed for hours in the West Wing. "You're the new domestic worker?" he asked when he encountered her in the kitchen. His English was excellent, marked by a slight American accent. "How are you finding Seoul?" "Cold, sir," Chika answered honestly. He laughed, a quick, uncomfortable sound. "Yes, well, it only gets colder from here, both the weather and—" He trailed off, glancing toward the West Wing, then shook his head. "Never mind. Welcome to the household." But it was Minseo's final warning that stayed with Chika, delivered late one night as she prepared to retire to her room. "Everyone called him boss," Minseo said quietly, staring at the closed door to the West Wing. "But no one calls him by name. Like speaking, it might summon something dangerous." Chika followed her gaze, thinking of the man with the scar, the quiet voice, the eyes that saw everything. She didn't know then that in 6 weeks she would be kneeling on his study floor with a knife in her hand and his life bleeding away beneath her fingers. She didn't know that saving him would become both her salvation and her trap. And somewhere in the West Wing, the man they called boss was keeping secrets that would change everything. Chika was cleaning the East Wing one night when she heard it. Crash. Her hand froze mid-reach. The study. The sound had come from Junho's private study at the end of the corridor. Rule 1, never enter the West Wing. But her nursing instincts, dormant for 3 years, suddenly roared to life. That wasn't the sound of something dropped. That was the sound of someone falling. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She ran toward the study, her heart hammering against her ribs. The door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. She pushed it open. "Mr. Kang!" Junho lay on the floor beside his desk, his body convulsing. His eyes were rolled back, showing only whites. And his veins... Oh God. Black lines spread beneath his skin. They originated from his left wrist, spreading up his arm, across his shoulder, creeping toward his chest. His skin had gone the colour of ash. Chika dropped to her knees beside him, her training overriding 3 years of rust. "Mr. Kang, can you hear me?" She checked his pulse, rapid, thready, irregular. His breathing was shallow, laboured. The convulsions were weakening, which was worse. It meant his body was giving up the fight. "Help!" she screamed. "Someone help! Call Dr. Han!" The mansion exploded into chaos. Dae-jung arrived first, gun drawn, eyes wild. Within minutes, the study filled with bodyguards, all armed, all shouting into phones. Dr. Han appeared within 20 minutes, his medical bag clutched in trembling hands. "What happened?" he demanded, falling to his knees beside Junho. "I found him like this," Chika said, moving aside but staying close. "The black lines? They're spreading." Dr. Han's face went pale. He worked quickly. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, checking Junho's pupils with a penlight. "We need to get him to a hospital." "No hospitals." Dae-jung's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You know the rules. No hospitals. Too many questions. Handle it here." "But I don't know what this is." "Then find someone who does. Now." What followed was 6 hours of organised pandemonium. Doctors arrived in waves, cardiac specialists, toxicologists, neurologists, each more prestigious and expensive than the last. They came from private clinics across Seoul, sworn to secrecy, paid in cash, 25 doctors in total, 25 failures. They by 4 a.m. Junho was dying and no one knew why. Chika had been pushed to the edges of the room, forgotten in the chaos. She watched as Dae-jung's legendary control finally cracked. He grabbed the 24th doctor by the throat and slammed him against the wall. "Fix him!" I can't. I don't know what this is." "Then you're useless." Dae-jung's hand moved toward his gun. "Stop," Dr. Han intervened, pulling Dae-jung back. "Killing them won't save him." While they argued, Chika moved closer to Junho. The other doctors had stepped back, conferring in hushed, defeated tones. She knelt beside him, studying what they'd missed. Her mind flashed back to her clinical rotation in Lagos, 3rd year of nursing school. A patient with subcutaneous clotting, necrotic pattern, secondary to manual extraction, blood flushing technique. It was a Hail Mary procedure, outdated, dangerous. But that patient had lived. "I know what this is," she said quietly. No one heard her. The doctors were still debating. Dae-jung was shouting into his phone, demanding a specialist from Japan. "I know what this is." Louder now. Heads turned, Dae-jung's cold eyes fixed on her. "What did you say?" Chika stood, her knees shaking but her voice steady. "It's subcutaneous clotting with necrotic pattern. The clot it's almost like it's alive, growing. It needs to be manually extracted and the wound flushed immediately." One of the doctors scoffed. "That's a theory from 30 years ago, completely disproven. Then why is he still dying?" Chika's voice cut through the room. 25 of you, with all your degrees and technology, and he's worse now than when I found him. You have nothing left to try." Dae-jung moved toward her, his hand resting on his gun. "You're the cleaning woman. Step back." But Chika didn't step back. She looked directly at him, breaking every rule she'd been given. "I'm also a nurse, and if you don't let me try, he'll be dead in 20 minutes. She's uneducated. I studied at the University of Lagos Medical School, 3.5 years. I dropped out to care for my family, but I completed clinical rotations in emergency medicine. I've seen this before." She pointed at the pulsing clot. "That needs to be cut out. The wound needs to be flushed. If it reaches his heart, if you're wrong, you die." Dae-jung's gun was in his hand now, pointed at her head. Chika's mouth went dry, but she nodded. "If I'm wrong, I die. But if I do nothing, we both die. Him in 20 minutes, me whenever you decide to pull that trigger." Silence fell over the study. The doctors watched, some with skepticism, others with the desperate hope of men who'd run out of options. Then Junho's eyes fluttered open. It was barely a moment, a few seconds of consciousness in hours of agony. But his gaze found Chika through the pain and the chaos. Their eyes met, and in that brief connection, she saw something that stole her breath. Recognition, permission, trust. His lips moved, forming a single word in Korean. "Hi." "Do it." His eyes closed again. Chika turned to Dr. Han. "I need a sterilized scalpel, medical tubing, saline, and an IV kit." "You can't be serious." "He just gave permission. Are you going to help me or watch him die?" Dr. Han looked at Dae-jung, who stared at Junho's ashen face for a long moment. Finally, he lowered his gun and nodded once. "You have one chance." Dr. Han's hands shook as he prepared the instruments. Chika sterilized her own hands, forcing her breathing to slow, her mind to focus. She'd done emergency procedures before, but never like this. Never with guns pointed at her head. Never with a man's life depending solely on half-remembered training from years ago. She positioned the scalpel over the pulsing clot on Junho's wrist. "If this works," she said quietly, "I'm going to need something you won't like." "What?" Dae-jung demanded. "My blood. Type O, negative universal donor. The flushing technique requires fresh blood with high oxygen content to push the toxin out. The IV blood you have is old, preserved. It won't work fast enough." "That's insane. It's what saved my patient in Lagos." She looked up at Dae-jung. "Your choice. Let me try it my way or bury him by sunrise." Another long silence. Then Dae-jung stepped back. Chika made the cut. Blood welled up, too dark, too thick, almost black. The smell was wrong, chemical and rotten. She worked quickly, her hand steady now, extracting the clot with surgical precision. Then came the unthinkable part. She inserted the IV needle into her own arm, connected the medical tubing, and used Dr. Han's equipment to create a direct transfusion into the wound site. Her blood flowed into Junho's vein, bright red against the corrupted black. The room held its breath. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the black toxin began to dissipate. Like ink diluted in water, it faded from Junho's veins. The necrotic pattern reversed, healthy colour returning to his skin. His breathing deepened. His convulsions stopped. Junho gasped, a deep, life-affirming breath, and colour flooded back to his face. Complete silence filled the study. 25 doctors stared in disbelief. Dae-young's gun hung forgotten at his side. Dr. Han's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, and Chika, feeling suddenly dizzy from blood loss and adrenaline, sat back on her heels and watched the man she de-saved begin to breathe normally for the first time in hours. She didn't know it then, but in that moment, everything changed. She'd saved his life, and in doing so, she'd bound them together in ways neither of them could yet understand. 3 days later. Junho survived, but the mystery deepened. Dr. Han ran every test imaginable on both of them: blood work, toxicology screens, genetic markers, antibody panels. Chika sat through hours of needle pricks and questions she couldn't answer. The results came back inconclusive. Medically speaking, there was nothing special about her blood. Type O negative, yes, but unremarkable otherwise. No rare antibodies, no unusual chemical composition. Yet the undeniable truth remained. Her blood had saved him when nothing else could. And there was a problem. Whenever Chika was away from Junho for more than a few hours, the symptoms returned. It started subtly. The first day after his recovery, she'd returned to her room in the servants' quarters for the night. By morning, Minseo came running. Mr. Kang was experiencing numbness in his extremities and fatigue. The moment Chika entered his presence, the symptoms faded. The second day, she'd been sent to run errands in the city with the driver. 4 hours away. Junho had called her back personally, his voice tight with pain. When she'd arrived, his veins were beginning to darken again. The third day, no one let her leave at all. She poisoned him herself, Dae-jung announced during an emergency meeting in Junho's study. Chika stood against the wall, exhausted and confused, while the inner circle debated her fate. This is blackmail. She creates the problem, then makes herself indispensable. Classic extortion. That's insane, Dr. Han protested. How would a domestic worker from Nigeria get access to a toxin this sophisticated? How would she even know what it was? Maybe she didn't work alone. All eyes turned to Chika. She straightened her spine, meeting Dae-jung's suspicious glare. I didn't poison anyone. I don't even know what that toxin was. I just recognized the pattern and did what I was trained to do. Convenient. Enough. Junho's voice cut through the argument, quiet but absolute. He sat behind his desk, still pale but recovering, his dark eyes unreadable. She stays. Boss. She stays. She doesn't leave the grounds until we understand this connection. That's final. Dae-jung's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly and left the room, throwing one last venomous look at Chika. Chika's life transformed overnight. She was moved from the cramped servants' quarters to a spacious guest room in the main wing, just down the hall from Junho's private suite. The room had a king-sized bed, an ensuite bathroom with heated floors, and a view of Seoul's glittering skyline that would have taken her breath away under different circumstances. But the door had no lock on her side, and she knew, everyone knew, she was a prisoner now, gilded cage or not. Her passport was confiscated. Her phone was replaced with a monitored device that only allowed supervised video calls. When her mother's worried face appeared on the screen 3 days into her house arrest, Chika had to force a smile. Are you safe, Chika? Her mother's eyes searched her face through the pixelated connection. Behind her, their small Lagos flat looked impossibly far away. Yes, Mama. Everything is fine. The lie tasted like ash. How is Emeka? He's stable. The money you sent. Thank God, Chika. We were able to afford the new medication. He's responding well. Her mother's worn face creased with relief, then worry again. But you look tired, my daughter. Are they working you too hard? No, Mama. Just adjusting. Different time zone, different food. Another lie. I have to go, but I'll call again soon. I love you. I love you too. God protect you. The screen went dark. Chica sat on the edge of her luxurious bed and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she dried her tears, straightened her spine and prepared for what came next. You will accompany Mr. Kang throughout his day for medical supervision. Dr. Han delivered the instruction the next morning, looking apologetic but firm. We need to understand the parameters of this connection. Stay within 50 feet of him at all times. If he shows any symptoms, notify me immediately. So Chica became Junho's shadow. She sat silently in his office while he conducted business meetings in rapid Korean she couldn't understand. The men who entered, always men, always in expensive suits, spoke in coded language even when they switched to English. References to shipments and territories and problems that needed handling. She noticed things. The way his men flinched when he spoke, even in his quiet, controlled voice. The way they avoided his eyes, unlike her. The way they left his office looking relieved to have survived the encounter. But she also noticed other things that didn't fit the monster narrative. Late one afternoon, she watched him take a phone call that made his rigid posture soften. He spoke in gentle Korean, his voice almost tender. After hanging up, he'd made a note and called his accountant. She'd caught enough of the conversation to understand. A donation to an orphanage in Gangnam. Anonymous, as always. He played classical music when he worked alone, Chopin mostly, the nocturnes that whispered of melancholy and loss. And he kept a sketchbook in his desk drawer, leather-bound and private. She'd glimpsed it once when he'd opened the drawer for a file. Charcoal drawings of Seoul at night, buildings and bridges rendered in careful detail. He'd caught her looking and closed the drawer quickly, something almost like embarrassment flashing across his usually impassive face. 7 days into her captivity, Junho finally spoke to her directly. They were in the library, him reading contracts, her sitting in a chair by the window with a book she wasn't really processing. The silence between them had been comfortable, surprisingly. Neither felt the need to fill it with meaningless chatter. Tell me about your family. Chica looked up, startled. He hadn't looked away from his papers, but his attention was clearly on her. Sir? Your family. You mentioned a brother when we tested your phone. Now he did look up, his dark eyes studying her. Tell me about him. And she did. Junho listened without judgment, without the pity she'd grown to hate. The storm hit Seoul with violent fury 3 nights later. Thunder shook the mansion's reinforced windows. Rain lashed the glass like bullets. Chica had been heading to her room when I'd noticed the light still on in Junho's office. Something made her pause, then knock. Come in. He sat behind his desk, but something was wrong. His hands gripped the mahogany edge hard enough to turn his knuckles white. His face was pale, a fine sheen of sweat on his forehead. His eyes stared at nothing, but she recognized the look, panic, carefully contained but present. Mr. Kang? Leave. His voice was tight, controlled, but she heard the strain beneath it. Thunder crashed, closer now. He flinched, a tiny, involuntary movement. Chica didn't leave. She closed the door quietly and sat in the chair across from his desk. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions. They stayed like that through the worst of it. Him gripping his desk, her sitting calmly, both pretending this wasn't happening. Slowly, gradually, his breathing evened, his grip loosened. Colour returned to his face. When the thunder finally rolled away, leaving only the whisper of rain, he spoke. One word, so quiet she almost missed it. Thank you. She nodded and stood to leave, granting him the dignity of privacy. Chica. She turned. It was the first time he'd used her name. You could have left. Why didn't you? She thought about it, then answered honestly. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is sit with someone in their fear. My father taught me that. Late one night, after 2 weeks of this strange existence, Junho asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. Why did you save me? They were in his study, him reviewing documents, her reading a book he'd lent her, a Korean novel with English translation on facing pages, helping her learn the language. She looked up. "Sir?" "That night. You could have let me die and gone home, collected your pay, escaped this house, returned to your family. No one would have blamed you." His eyes were intense, searching. "So why did you risk your life to save mine?" Chica closed the book slowly, considering her answer. The easy response was ready, but that wasn't the whole truth. "Because I'm a nurse," she started. "I took an oath, even if I never finished school." "That's not a good enough reason." He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "Not for what you risked. Dae-jung would have killed you if you'd failed. You knew that." Chica met his eyes, breaking the rule for the 100th time. Neither of them cared about the rule anymore. "Because you looked at me," she said quietly. "Really looked at me, like I was a person, not just a servant." She paused. "But you saw me. And in that moment when you were dying, you trusted me, a stranger, a cleaning woman. You gave me permission to try." She took a breath. "How could I not try to save someone who saw me as human?" Long silence stretched between them. "You shouldn't have saved me," Junho finally said, his voice low. "I'm not a good man, Chica. I've done things. Terrible things. The men who work for me are afraid because they should be. I've hurt people, killed people. I will again." He looked away. "You saved someone who doesn't deserve saving." "Maybe." Chica surprised herself with her own certainty. "But you're a man worth saving anyway. Good, bad. We're all more complicated than that. You donate to orphanages. You protect your people fiercely. You kept your sister's photo on your desk, even though it clearly hurts to look at." His head snapped up. "How did you—" "I noticed it. The frame you turn face down when people come in, but turn back when you're alone. She was beautiful, and you loved her very much." For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far. Then his shoulders sagged, the armor cracking. "I got her killed," he whispered. "My choices, my life. It got her killed. So no, Chica. I'm not worth saving, but I'm grateful you're foolish enough to think otherwise." Before she could respond, her monitored phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. Unknown number, a text message, and a photo. Her hands started shaking. "What is it?" Junho was around the desk instantly, his protective instincts flaring. Chica showed him the screen, unable to speak. The message read, "You saved the wrong person. Now your brother pays." The photo showed Emeka outside his school in Lagos, his small backpack on his shoulders, completely unaware he was being photographed. A red circle had been drawn around his head. "No." The word ripped from her throat. "No, no, no." Junho took the phone, his face transforming into something terrible and cold. The man who'd shown vulnerability moments ago vanished, replaced by the Mafia boss who made grown men flinch. "When was this taken?" "I don't know. My brother. They're threatening my brother. Call your mother. Now. Tell her to get Emeka somewhere safe. My men in Lagos will protect them." "Your men? You have men in Lagos?" "I have men everywhere." He was already typing on his own phone, rapid Korean commands. "No one threatens what's mine. I'll handle this." Through her panic, one word penetrated. "I'm not yours." Junho looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "You became mine the moment your blood entered my veins," he said quietly. "You saved my life. That creates a debt that can't be paid, and in my world, debts are sacred." His hand cupped her face, gentle despite the violence promised in his voice. "No one touches you. No one touches your family. I swear it." Chica stared at him, caught between terror for her brother and something else. Something warm and dangerous and impossible, blooming in her chest despite everything. She'd saved a Mafia boss. And somehow, impossibly, she was beginning to care for him. God help them both. 4 days after the threat. The investigation consumed the mansion like a fever. Daijung worked around the clock, coordinating with contacts across 3 continents. Junho barely slept. Dr. Han had set up a makeshift laboratory in one of the mansion's unused rooms. Chika sat on the medical examination table for the 5th time that week, watching him study her blood samples under a microscope with increasingly agitated movements. "This is impossible," he muttered, adjusting the lens. "Medically, scientifically impossible." "What is?" Chika asked, rubbing the crook of her arm where he'd drawn yet another vial. Dr. Han looked up, his face pale behind his glasses. "Your blood doesn't just neutralize the poison, it contains antibodies to a compound that shouldn't exist outside a military-grade laboratory. Antibodies that take years of exposure to develop. Antibodies that—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's as if you were already exposed to this toxin before, but that's impossible." Chika's stomach dropped. "I've never been poisoned. I've never even been seriously sick." "Then someone in your bloodline was." Dr. Han pulled up a genetic analysis on his laptop, pointing to highlighted sequences. "This is genetic immunity, Chika, passed down through generations. Someone in your family survived this toxin, or something very similar, and their body S adaptation was encoded in their DNA. You inherited it." The room seemed to tilt. Chika gripped the edge of the examination table. "That's not possible. My family, we're just ordinary people. My father was a schoolteacher. My mother sews clothes. My grandmother was a village healer." She stopped. Healer. The word hung in the air. Dr. Han leaned forward. "Your grandmother. Tell me about her." "I never knew her. She died before I was born. My mother doesn't talk about her much." Chika's mind raced through fragments of overheard conversations, stories told in whispers. "She died young. My mother always said it was grief, that she lost too many people in the war." "What war?" "The Biafran War, 1967 to 1970. My grandmother lived in the eastern region." Dr. Han typed rapidly into his laptop, pulling up historical records. His face went even paler. "Chika, there were documented cases during that war, experimental weapons used by various forces, biological agents tested on civilian populations. The international community buried most of it, but the medical records exist if you know where to look." He turned the laptop toward her. Scanned documents filled the screen, stamped with faded red letters. Classified. Reports of village poisonings, mysterious deaths, survivors with unexplained immunity. "Your grandmother," Dr. Han said quietly. "She was one of the survivors, wasn't she?" A call to her mother confirmed it. "Your grandmother." She paused, choosing words carefully. "She was a healer in our village. When the war came, she stayed to help people. Many villages in the east were attacked, not just with bullets, but with other things. Poisons in the water, strange sicknesses that killed within days." Chika's heart hammered. "What happened to her?" "She survived something that killed everyone else in her compound. 23 people dead in one night. She was the only one who lived. The elders said she had been chosen by the ancestors, that her medicine was too strong for death to claim her." Her mother's eyes glistened. "But she was never the same after. She could heal others, but she carried that poison in her blood for the rest of her life. It's why she died young. 43 years old, her body just gave up." "She passed the immunity to you?" "The doctors in Lagos tested me once when I was pregnant with you. They found antibodies they couldn't explain. They said it was a miracle I survived childbirth with you at all. Something in my blood should have rejected you, but instead—" Her mother smiled sadly. "Instead, I gave you her gift, her burden." Chika closed her eyes, understanding flooding through her. "That's why I could save him." "Save who?" "Nothing, Mama. Thank you for telling me." She forced brightness into her voice. "How is Amika? The guards I sent, are they helping?" Her mother nodded, glancing off-screen where Junho's security team maintained watch. "They're very serious men. They scare me a little, but Amika feels safe. Chika, what is happening there? Why do we need armed guards?" "Just a precaution. I'll explain everything when I can. I love you, Mama. I love you too, my daughter. Come home soon. The screen went dark. Chica sat in silence, processing everything. Her grandmother's survival, the inherited immunity, the impossible coincidence that had brought her to this mansion, to this man, at exactly the moment when her genetic legacy could save his life. Or was it a coincidence at all? Dae-jung entered the study an hour later, his face grim. He spread photographs across Junho's desk, surveillance images, chemical formulas, classified documents with Korean and English text. The poison is called Baekja, he said without preamble. White porcelain, a toxin created by a North Korean biochemist in the 1960s as part of their covert weapons program. It was designed to be undetectable and untraceable, kills within hours, leaves no forensic evidence. Junho studied the documents, his expression darkening. I've heard rumours of Baekja. Most people think it's a myth. It was real, but the formula was supposedly destroyed when the program was shut down in 1972. Dae-jung pulled out another document. Only 3 people in the world know how to synthesize it now. Dr. Kim Jung-soo, dead 15 years ago, Professor Yoon Hae-jin, serving life in a Chinese prison, and Lee Sang-min. The name landed like a bomb in the quiet study. Junho's jaw clenched. Sang-min. Who's Lee Sang-min? Chica asked. Dae-jung and Junho exchanged a loaded glance. Finally, Junho spoke, his voice carefully controlled. He was our chemist. Worked for the organization for 12 years. Brilliant, meticulous, loyal, or so we thought. 5 years ago, he vanished the same week my sister was killed. You think he was involved? We suspected, but never proved it. Junho stood, pacing to the window, his silhouette dark against Seoul's lights. The attack on Ji-yeon was coordinated, professional. Someone inside our organization had fed information to our rivals, security routes, safe house locations, her schedule. Sang-min was one of only 7 people with that level of access. But you couldn't find him. He disappeared completely. No trail, no sightings, no communications. Either he's dead, or he's very good at hiding. Junho turned back to them, his face a mask of controlled rage. If Sang-min poisoned me, it means 2 things. 1, he's alive. 2, he's working with someone inside this house. Someone who gave him access to poison my drink that night. Chica felt ice slide down her spine. Someone you trust. Someone we all trust, Dae-jung confirmed grimly. The security footage from that night shows no unauthorized entries. Whoever poisoned Boss has legitimate access to every part of this mansion. Late that night, after Dae-jung had left to follow new leads, Junho sat in the darkened library, staring at a photograph in his hands. Chica found him there, his face illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the windows. She sat beside him without asking permission. They'd moved past formalities weeks ago. That's her, isn't it? Chica asked gently. Your sister. Junho didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the photograph, a young woman, maybe 20, with his same dark eyes and sharp features softened by genuine joy. She was laughing, caught mid-motion, so alive the photo seemed inadequate to contain her. Ji-yeon, he finally said. 5 years younger than me. She was supposed to be safe. I promised our parents I'd protect her after they died. Instead, I got her killed. You didn't kill her. I might as well have. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. We had a business meeting that night, a critical negotiation with a Chinese syndicate. Ji-yeon was supposed to attend a gallery opening. I was supposed to go with her as security. But I sent her alone because business was more important, because I thought she'd be safe with just the usual bodyguards. He set the photo down carefully, as if it might shatter. They hit her convoy 3 blocks from the gallery. Professional ambush. Her bodyguards died trying to protect her. She was shot 7 times. By the time I got there, she was already gone. Chica reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Don't, he said harshly. Don't comfort me. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. I know what I am. I know what my choices cost her. Is that why you keep hunting? Chica asked quietly. Why you can't let it go. I've dismantled 3 rival organizations in 5 years, destroyed everyone who might have been involved. But it's never enough. She's still dead. And I still wake up every night thinking about that phone call, Dae-jung's voice telling me she was gone. He looked at Chika finally, his eyes haunted. The guilt never stops. It's a cage I built for myself, and I deserve to stay locked inside it. Chika understood that cage. She'd lived in her own for 3 years. I left nursing school, she said suddenly. When my father died, I was 6 months from graduating. I had a scholarship, a path forward, a way to help my family. But when he got sick, I came home to care for him. I told myself I'd go back after he recovered, but he didn't recover. Her voice cracked, but she continued. He died while I was sleeping. I'd been awake for 3 days straight, monitoring him, and I fell asleep for 2 hours. Just 2 hours. When I woke up, he was gone. If I'd stayed awake, maybe I could have saved him. If I'd finished school, maybe I would have known what to do. Maybe Amika wouldn't be sick now if I'd been a real nurse instead of a dropout. You couldn't have saved him. And you couldn't have saved your sister. Chika turned to face him fully. Guilt is a cage we build for ourselves, Junho. We lock ourselves inside and throw away the key. But you didn't kill Ji-yeon. I didn't kill my father. We made choices, human choices, and terrible things happened anyway. That's life. That's tragedy. Junho stared at their joined hands, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin. You're dangerous, Chika Okafor. Why? Because you make me hope, and hope is a luxury men like me can't afford. Maybe it's not a luxury, Chika said softly. Maybe it's a necessity. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. The walls he'd built so carefully, the distance he'd maintained so ruthlessly, cracked. You're not alone in this anymore, Chika whispered. He raised his hand to her face, his touch gentle despite the calluses from weapons and violence. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and she felt her breath catch. I'm going to kiss you, he said quietly. Tell me now if you don't want me to. She should say no. Instead, she leaned closer. Yes. The kiss was desperate, inevitable, terrifying. His lips found hers with a hunger that spoke of years of loneliness, and she responded with equal need, her hands fisting in his shirt. It wasn't gentle or practiced. It was raw and real and frightening in its intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Chika saw fear in his eyes that matched her own. This is a mistake, he said. Probably, she agreed. You should run from me. Too late for that. He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. And Chika let herself fall into something that terrified her more than any poison. They were still in the library, foreheads pressed together, when Dae-jung burst through the door. Boss, we have a problem. Junho was on his feet instantly, his body shifting from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. What happened? Someone hacked our security system. I just found the breach. Happened 3 nights ago, lasted exactly 47 minutes. Dae-jung pulled up footage on his tablet. They wiped most of the data, but I recovered fragments. The screen showed grainy security footage, time-stamped the night before Junho was poisoned. A figure moved through the mansion's corridors with absolute confidence, no hesitation at locked doors, no confusion about camera positions. The figure entered Junho's private study, spent 12 minutes inside, then left, still unhurried. Can you identify them? Junho demanded. No, they knew where every camera was positioned, kept their face hidden. But look at this. Dae-jung enhanced the footage, zooming in on the figure's movements. They moved like family, no checking room numbers, no wrong turns. This isn't someone who broke in, this is someone who lives here. Chika felt the temperature in the room drop. Junho stared at the screen, his face carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. It's someone who lives here, someone I trust, someone who's been in my house, eating my food, under my protection, while planning to kill me. The poison was in your whiskey, Dae-jung confirmed. That Yamazaki 18 you keep in the study, Only a handful of people know you drink from that bottle. Me, you, Dr. Han, Min Seo. Junho counted off on his fingers, then stopped. Who else? That's it, boss. Just us four. Silence fell, heavy with betrayal and dawning horror. Find them, Junho said finally. All of them. Bring them here, now. As Daijung left, Chika stood, her medical training warring with growing dread. Junho, if it really is someone that close, then I've been harbouring a traitor for God knows how long. He looked at her, and she saw the boy who I'd lost his sister buried beneath the Mafia boss, who I'd learned to trust no one. 5 years, Chika. 5 years I've been hunting Jion's killers, and one of them has been standing beside me the whole time. The mansion's alarm system suddenly screamed to life. Both of them froze. Then explosions, multiple, simultaneous, rocked the building's foundation. Get down! Junho threw himself over Chika as windows shattered inward, glass raining down like deadly snow. Through the chaos, Chika heard gunfire, shouting, the organised chaos of an assault force that knew exactly what they were doing. It's starting, she whispered against his chest. Stay close to me, Junho commanded, pulling a gun from his desk drawer. Don't leave my sight for any reason, understand? She nodded, too terrified to speak. Outside the library, the mansion burned, and somewhere in the chaos, a traitor smiled. What do you think will happen next? Who do you think the traitor is? Leave your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button and see you in part 2 because the story's just getting started.